Y'all, fantastic news out of the U.S. Supreme Court this morning. In their first official act of the new term, the Supreme Court just granted cert to Smith Wesson versus Mexico. This lawsuit is Mexico's attempt to destroy our Second Amendment through our own court system. It started out as a lawsuit against basically the entire U.S. gun manufacturing industry, Smith & Wesson and a whole host of other gun companies, basically alleging that they are responsible for Mexico's cartel and gang violence problem, which is absolutely ridiculous. Mexico's policy towards their gangs and cartels is hugs, not bullets. I'm not making that up. That's literally what they called it.
The president calls his approach hugs, not bullets.
How is that working out for Mexico?
Very well.
There are still 30,000 homicides in Mexico, and very few of those are prosecuted. So there's an idea that there's still lawlessness in Mexico. Is that fair?
Of course we prosecute them. There's no impunity in Mexico. They all get prosecuted.
It's a small percent.
More than before.
They have a lot of nerve to then come to us and say, actually, this is your fault because you're making illegal sales. All right, now, you have to remember that if there are bad actors, and obviously there are always going to be some bad actors, that are actually making illegal sales that are falling into the hands of cartels, it's the ATF's job to catch those bad actors, right? So you would think Mexico would be suing the ATF for doing a poor job enforcing the U.S. laws on these things. But no, they're suing the manufacturers, which lets us know what this is actually about. They're trying to shut down the Second Amendment. And this is not just about Mexico. This lawsuit has strong globalist ties to the United Nations. UN allies have filed amicus briefs when the case was at the First Circuit, arguing that, no, Mexico's kind of got a point. This is a human rights issue. I don't know. Stupid stuff. But it's important to know who's watching. The UN has their eyes on this lawsuit, and for very good reason, because this lawsuit would essentially enact and enforce on the United States a lot of the provisions, a lot of the most heinous gun control imaginable that is contained in the UN Small Arms Treaty. Now, mind you, a treaty has to be signed by the Senate. But if they can get it enacted through our own court system, they've completely bypassed the Senate, and they want to do that because they can't get the votes. Because you, the American people and the National Association for Gun Rights members out there, have kept serious pressure on the Senate to stop them from ever even thinking about signing that treaty. So, Mexico is trying to do it through the U.S. court system. Now, here's what's at stake with this lawsuit. If they were to succeed, not only would this put the gun manufacturers out of business, something the left has been trying to do for a while, it would also basically enact a nationwide assault weapons ban, among many, many other outrageous forms of gun control. So there's a lot at stake with this. When the case was first filed in Massachusetts, that's right, Mexico crossed all the way up into Massachusetts to find a friendly venue to file this lawsuit. The judge threw out the case. He said, Congress said you can't do this with the PLCAA. That's legislation Congress passed shielding gun manufacturers from liability for the criminal actions of third parties, right? Because it's not the gun manufacturer's fault if a criminal goes and does something illegal with a gun. That's what Congress said. And mind you, this judge who threw out the lawsuit, he's not a friend of gun rights. He's the same judge who heard our lawsuit against Massachusetts assault weapons ban. And in oral arguments, he called our interpretation of the Second Amendment a suicide pact. He's not a friend of gun rights. That's how outrageous Mexico's lawsuit is. Even this judge said, no, you haven't got a leg to stand on. Congress said you can't do this, and he dismissed the case. So Mexico appealed the case to the First Circuit Court of Appeals. The First Circuit Court of Appeals is one of the most outrageously left-leaning courts in the land. And so naturally they were, well, we kind of think Mexico's got a point. And they undismissed the case. They revived it. So Smith and Wesson had no choice but to appeal to the Supreme Court. They went to the Supreme Court and they said, this is what Mexico is doing. It's outrageous. It's illegal. And we need you to dismiss the case. Your National Association for Gun Rights agreed. We filed an amicus brief asking the Supreme Court to do just that. We told them the First Circuit interpreted the PLCAA incorrectly, and they really twisted the precedent in order to say, you know what, it actually might be the U.S. gun manufacturer's fault that Mexico has a cartel problem. It's outrageous stuff. And in fact, I want to read you just kind of the opening of what we said in the amicus brief, because it's a lot of really good stuff here. This case presents an issue of paramount importance. whether a foreign nation can use the federal courts to perform an end run around the individual rights guaranteed by the Second Amendment and the will of Congress to impose its own policy preferences on the American people. And then we go on to say, the Second Amendment rights or any other rights of American citizens should not be in jeopardy simply because a foreign government cannot or will not adequately address its own domestic crime problems. And those foreign governments should not be allowed to use the courts of the United States to avoid the consequences of their own domestic policy failures. The court should grant certiorari and close the courthouse doors to foreign governments seeking to infringe upon the rights of American citizens. That's what we asked the Supreme Court to do. And this morning they did just that. They granted cert to this lawsuit, which means they're going to hold oral arguments on it, and they're going to rule once and for all on whether Mexico has a right to weaponize our own court system against us to destroy a Bill of Rights guarantee. Now, the fact that the Supreme Court, in their first official action of the new term, took this case, I think is an indicator that the Supreme Court understands both the serious nature of this lawsuit and how absolutely illegal and outrageous it is. From the Supreme Court's perspective, it's an easy case. Congress has the right to say, no, the courts can't decide a certain thing. Congress has the right to remove that sort of jurisdiction from the courts, and that is what they did with the PLCAA. All the Supreme Court has to do is say, no, Congress has spoken on it, Congress is very clear on this, you can't do it, and throw the case out. And I am very hopeful that that is what they will do. Your National Association for Gun Rights will be filing another amicus brief asking them to do just that, and we should be getting an oral argument date sometime in the months ahead, and we will certainly keep you posted on that. But for today, great news. If you'd like to get involved, there's a link to a petition you can sign in the comments below. We've done another video that does a deep dive on the full implications of this lawsuit and its ties to the United Nations Small Arms Treaty. If you'd like to watch that, check it out right here. And we would ask for your help to stand with us against Mexico's outrageous attack on our Second Amendment.